Stop asking your buyers to do all the work of scheduling a meeting for you using calendar links. Chronologic AI predicts guests' availability with over 80% accuracy, so you can improve your buyer's experience by allowing them to just click accept on a meeting invite. Chronologic does the work of scheduling the meeting for everyone. Visit chronologic.com/making fun of marketing for your free 2-week trial.
I mean, for 15 years, the last 15 years, socially caused marketing has been just a cakewalk for marketers. It's always part of the plan. It's a slam dunk that it's going to be successful. The environment causing social marketing. That's changed.
I'm Scott Logan, and we're making fun of marketing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Making Fun of Marketing, where we try to make light of the things that are ridiculous that we do, and we discuss the interesting challenges that we face. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting challenge that we have to face now more than ever, and it's social causes and social marketing, and how do you evolve and push forward the persona that your company takes on. So we'll go ahead and hit that topic here with Don Keane. He is the advisor or advising CMO of Success KPI. You can give us the details on what that is all about. But an interesting stat about Don is that he's also one of my former bosses. And obviously, you're on the show. You're one of my favorite bosses. I've had it all the time. So welcome to the show, Don.
Is that true?
It absolutely is true. You're the only one who, when you come into town, I make sure to ping you and say, hey, let's meet up for dinner. Now, whether you take me up on that offer, we have a gripe to settle about that. But no, I'm just kidding. Without embarrassing me too much, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, Scott, great to be on the show. I love your series. It's just literally made me laugh out loud many days during the week watching your stuff. And I just love the topic at the end of the day. I think we're going to be a little bit more serious today on our topic, but thanks for having me. And we've recently been advising a number of startups with private equity folks like Marlin Equity and Banneker Capital and Partners and, et cetera. And, long list of tech companies, B2B spaces like MicroStrategy, Genesis, Intuit way back when, and really far back, consumer packaged goods. Started my career selling and schlocking Lucky Charms cereal. If you've ever eaten that red balloon, thank you. At the end of the day, and Cinnamon Toast Crunch and things like that. But I've been in tech for now 25 plus years. And yeah, I mean, to your point, I have not seen a day that it's harder to be a marketer than right now with everything going on, with coming out of COVID and all the things that, everybody's living with that, with the global economy. I know we're not going to dig into that, but everybody knows the ups and downs. But social and cause marketing is on fire right now, and it's not a good fire. I think brands need to be very, very aware of what they're getting into and how to kind of manage through very, very kind of choppy waters.
Yeah. So let's add a little bit of detail to that with some specifics. Some of the incidents that we're going to talk about here are the Bud Light and Target and Disney instances where, like, Bud Light had the Pride supporting posts, and same with Target with the t-shirts, and Disney with having the Pride parade, and going down the road of, hey, let's be supportive of everybody out there and taking a stance. And then all of a sudden there was some unwarranted backlash. Like, I think Bud Light had a 15% share value drop. They lost the #1 domestic beer sales ranking for the first time in 20 some years to Modelo, and year over year for that June month, their sales were down like 25% almost. Probably more backlash than they thought. And some other companies have had the same type of, tightrope walk to walk. But what is your take on that? And where do you think companies' heads are at as far as how they're navigating this?
Yeah, I mean, for 15 years, the last 15 years, social and cause marketing has been just a cakewalk for marketers. It's always part of the plan. It's a slam dunk that it's going to be successful. the environment, recycling, maybe the CEO's like favorite charity. At the end of the day, you're guaranteed to get a positive ROI out of cause and social marketing. That's changed. And, I think for the first time, marketers need to really, really take a look at what they're supporting. And it's not so much what they're supporting, it's how they're supporting it, right? And making sure that they're taking into consideration some of the risks. I think about Anheuser-Busch and, a couple things. One is I'm really supportive of what they did with Dylan and, wanting a trans influencer in support of the brand during March Madness. I thought it was great. It really kind of was inclusive. But, they did a couple of things that, maybe are learnings for everybody. One is when issues arose, they were really slow on PR. They waited days to respond. Yeah. And you can't do that as a leading global brand. I think you got to come out decisive. The company stood for inclusion. They stood for LGBTQ+. And they really, really, really kind of came out down the middle of the road, which I think confused people. So that's number one. I think number two is you got to know your customer segments, right? I mean, we did this when we were together. You really need to know that you may have sensitivity on some of these topics and manage that in, One more thought is politics and the political environment is not something that when you focus on the U.S. market, you often have to think about. I mean, you do if you're marketing in the Middle East or in Asia, certain countries in Asia, Africa. But for the first time, I think you've got to be really aware that in the U.S., things are very, very decisive or divisive right now.
Yeah. Almost every room is split 50-50 and there may be fewer people who are in the middle. And maybe 20 plus years ago, there were more people who were in the middle and didn't really think it upon themselves to make decisions based on what they saw a company supporting, and maybe companies didn't feel that they needed to even take a stance on these things. But now, even when I was at a conference recently, very large, well-known company in the marketing and sales technology space put up a Kamala Harris meme, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, that relates. That's kind of a funny thing to throw in there. They weren't taking a political stance. They just used a meme. And all of a sudden, we get people on the trade show floor when we break from the session, and it was being talked about like you wouldn't believe. I was shocked at how many people said that they either loved it or they literally were changing their opinion of the company because of it. And I'm not taking a stance one way or another. I didn't even think anything of it. I was just like, oh, that was cute, thinking of it in the marketing stance. But I don't think they realized that they were going to divide the room at that point when they threw that joke up there that wasn't even taking a political stance. So I think you're right. There's way, way more to think about when you start throwing political and social issues into the marketing bucket.
Yeah, it's interesting too how it's rolled into even more issues, right? So you had all these great stats on the effects for AB InBev with the brand Bud Light, and now you've got employees, so employees of the company at potentially like Target being threatened over company policies. So that has changed the conversation to a complete C-suite conversation, almost like a board level conversation on some of these causes and social marketing efforts because of the dramatic impact that it's having right now. Hey, I'm a huge believer in social marketing. And if I could say one thing that sticks with everybody here that's going to watch this is stand your ground. Like keep going, keep supporting it. It is the right answer. But you do have to be sensitive to how you present it, what you're supporting, and maybe the timing that you're supporting stuff at the end of the day, because God knows you don't want anybody getting hurt at your company because of a marketing campaign.
Yeah. Someone getting hurt at the company is unfortunately more real than just their feelings hurt or their emotional distress increasing, because it affects your everyday. And when we go to the Pride Parade every year here in Salt Lake, and my wife likes to go and get matching t-shirts for the whole family, and we make a big deal out of it.
Right.
So she went to Target to get matching t-shirts for all of us, and they had no children's sizes. They were just gone for the first time. And so she quickly Googled it and asked an employee, and they found out that they removed those because of that social media post that went viral where the Target wasn't standing down from having those shirts sold. They were just removing the children's shirts because of that post, because they said they feared for the employees of the stores in case the most extreme of the most extreme viewed people were going to come and cause harm to the store or to employees or cause a ruckus where maybe stopping the ruckus would cause injury. And that was shocking to hear that that was the cause and effect that we're faced with right now. And I feel that it's not just with big brands, it's with small brands as well. We had a situation where a contractor had ended his contract. He wasn't even from this country. And they posted very, very strong, very, very one-sided derogatory posts on their LinkedIn. Now, even though their contract had ended with us months ago and they hadn't posted anything on LinkedIn at that time they were employed with us, now that their contract ended, they had us as their most recent employer and didn't put an end date, and then went radical on LinkedIn. Well, a few people picked that up and said, how could ChronoLogic support these views? Does this mean ChronoLogic is the advocate for this type of a person and this type of a point of view? And they had decent sized followings. This was even within the first few months of my employment here almost 3 years ago. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to do some reconnaissance. So within, I think it was an hour where I was able to get our leadership on a call and then respond. We posted that this person is no longer employed. The contract ended at this date and time, and we don't support the views of this person. This is this own person's individual. Please remove us from the post and not include us in this conversation, but please continue to have the conversation as you feel fit. Just know that we're not a part of it. And that person refused to remove us, but people in the thread, which was now dozens and dozens of people commenting on this thing, did come and back us up. And the comment said, hey, ChronoLogic posted this in a timely fashion. They said that this is a contractor. They're not employed anymore. Please take them out of the conversation. And then after a few of those posts happened from the commenters, it then was directed more so to what happened as opposed to us being related to what was being shared. And so that was a bit of a relief. And I think, like you said, the timeliness of our reaction helped quite a bit because it was during the time that the thread was still very lively and active that we inserted ourselves into the conversation and took our stance within that. I don't think that anyone is immune to it. You may have even had some situations as well.
Yeah, in that example, I am glad to see that you guys reacted quickly. Could have gotten worse. There's always been this kind of, explicit and implicit kind of rule on certain platforms like LinkedIn, right? It is more reflective of you acting as an employee of the company versus, what you might say or do on potentially Facebook or Twitter. So it's always been a fine line. I mean, a lot of companies have employees sign certain restrictions. We don't have to get into that, but that varies, especially as you kind of move up the chain. They're more interested in what you're saying and not saying, right? At the end of the day, if you're the CMO of the company, as an example. I think most people on LinkedIn that view LinkedIn posts are educated and aware enough to understand the difference between somebody going off and what the company has to say. I also think that people are pretty well mannered. Everybody's been on Twitter. You really want to get into it. It's a great platform still for that, give or take Elon. Right place, right time. I think you guys reacted well. I think more brands, maybe we talked about AB. I think Starbucks, you had mentioned them earlier. I think Starbucks was really, really quick to jump in on some news reporting that they were restricting stores from decorating for Pride. And it looks like it's actually factual. that based on certain regions of the country, managers were asking store employees not to put up certain things because of a fear of violence. And I think they've worked through that as a solution. But what I did love is that Starbucks came right out and they stood their ground and they said, no, every store is allowed to decorate. We 100% support it. We're looking into it. And, we're going to stand our ground as a brand and deliver on our promise of inclusion for the company. And I think that's important. I think that's important for everybody. As a marketer, you can't market to a slim minority that doesn't necessarily voice the silent majority's thoughts. Maybe in many ways, Anheuser-Busch is reflective of the fact that it wasn't a slim majority. It was a much bigger group for that customer base. So,
yeah, that goes back to that second point that you called out of know your customers, and maybe your version of supporting inclusion or whatever cause it is that you're supporting. It doesn't even have to be LGBTQIA+, that you have, could be even an environmental thing. If you're in that space, you just need to maybe take different tact and different approaches to take a stance if you're going to do so. You raised a question earlier, a comment where there's employee agreements that you share or don't share because of the reflection of you. What's your viewpoint on that and restricting it from LinkedIn? Because LinkedIn is essentially your work version of you.
Yeah. I was hoping you weren't going to ask me this question.
I'm going right at it. That's the interesting one.
It came up. When it came up. It is a tough one because, we're right now talking about a topic I'm very passionate about, just given who I am as a person and who I am as a marketing leader. I am necessarily not a huge fan of silencing people at the end of the day, but I think you need to keep it professional. To your point, LinkedIn is a very different platform than Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I think it's okay to have opinions. I think it's okay to have potentially opinions that may differ from the company, but at least stay somewhat close to the values and be professional. And I think in the example you gave, the individual may have gone off the deep end a little bit, which is his or her right, but you are kind of carrying that company badge with you on certain platforms. And I think you need to be very sensitive on LinkedIn because there are ramifications not only for the company, but for you and your career.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the size of the company you are, perhaps depending on your legal team, you have a choice or don't have a choice because, who's going to go after a 5-person startup for $1 billion versus who's going to go after Anheuser-Busch for $1 billion. There's a bigger target on your back. So that may matter too, as far as what steps you take. But I agree. We always just mention to employees after that incident happened that, hey, we're not going to say, don't say something. If free to say whatever you want on any of the social platforms. However, when it comes to LinkedIn, do know that it is an extension of the company. So just be tactful. Still support causes, still do whatever you want. Just don't be derogatory is essentially what we were stressing. Just don't be negative. And make sure that it's contextual to the platform that you're on. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, that's disconnected from the company. That's you. But when it's LinkedIn, there is an extension there.
I've gotten a kick over the years about people like on Twitter. This is the Twitter of Steve Smith. And it reflects Steve Smith's comments and thoughts, not the company that he or she or they are working for at the end of the day. So, there are workarounds. But again, it just gets back to it's a unique political environment for marketers right now. Again, nothing like most people have ever operated in, separate of some of the global stuff you may be running and managing through. You've really almost got to slow down, I think, and understand kind of where it's going and how much of that rhetoric you need to incorporate and really consider and how much is just political banter. That's going on for the election. And unfortunately, it's the next couple of years here at least that this is going to have to be discussed, I think, within the marketing team. And then I think within the extended executive team at companies about what kind of brand. Being bold may be the answer, but that was also the answer the last 10 years and the easy answer for a brand. You may want to think about what being bold means now for you and your company.
Yeah. I think it's probably common sense, or maybe an easy decision to make is a better way to put it, to just steer clear of politics whatsoever. Like, don't even make it a thing that you're going to take a stand on publicly, perhaps, unless maybe your business aligns to that and that's your market. And maybe it's expected. But I'll pose a question to you on, like, just say, because at the time of this recording, Pride Month, and a lot of companies, including ourselves, put the Pride logo incorporated into our logo. Is pretty common to see on LinkedIn, and is just not taking a stance on a social topic like Pride during June, also taking a stance. You see some companies that don't have anything, and you're like, well, why don't they have something? As a marketer, you're like, is there a reason? Like, what's going on there? Like, it almost raises the question if you step out. So what's your take on not touching an issue?
Yeah, let me first comment that the funny thing about the Pride logo change in June for companies is that was their program. You know, at the end of the day, they may have something on Slack to the employee group and saying it's Pride Month, and they change the logo and, hey, we killed it. And so that's pretty funny to me. It's just kind of like at a high level. I've definitely noticed this year a lot of companies have not changed their logos. And I understand as a marketer, and it is a little bit of a statement for the brand. They're shying away. You know, again, nobody's really ever seen the impact of anything like what happened to Bud Light. And good news is Bud Light's recovering, right? At the end of the day, shares back up, stock values back up, you know, things like that, which is good news. But I think if a brand feels that they don't want to do it, I think that's okay. I'm supportive of that and understand, but make sure you talk it through. Make sure you think about it. And maybe you think about other ways that you can be supportive on that social cause, right? That you've championed probably for the last 10 years with your logo change, you know, and maybe some t-shirts or something internally. So yeah, you could do it in many different ways, but it gets to the discussion about just such a sensitive time.
Yeah. And we like to talk about tactics when it gets down to this part of the discussion. And I think the LinkedIn component is also something that has some tactical decisions. It's not just, do you change your logo or not? Like, that's one component, but that component has dynamics to it. Do you change just the banner on your LinkedIn page, because that lives only with the company? Or do you also change the favicon or icon that goes on everybody's experience that works or has ever worked for you in the past and lists you? So now it's on their profile page. Now, people know that it's connected and controlled by the company, but some people who have a different point of view, and it doesn't even have to be Pride, it could be whatever. If you adapt your logo to support a cause, maybe that person isn't totally aligned with that cause for whatever reason. And do you do that? Or do you just do the banner? Or do you do both? That now becomes an even sensitive topic where, okay, we're supportive. We have a program. Part of the program is to change a logo. Well, now what level do you change a logo?
That's totally right. I mean, you're right. 3 years ago is you changed the logo, changed the banner. You had an LGBTQ plus campaign running on LinkedIn and maybe even on Google's network or whatever. And you were really kind of out there. And now, you know, what's that kind of right balance? But that's the right question to me. That's what marketers have to go. It shouldn't be as easy as, oh, let's do nothing. Let's not do anything, because you stood for the cause. Your company's behind the cause. Do something. You know, I think at the end of the day, especially looking into next year, which next year could be worse from a political environment. We're in the heat of the election. You can see how the kind of battle lines are getting drawn. And I think for cause marketing and social marketing, it's going to be even more challenging for marketers. So good luck.
Yeah, good luck for sure. So at a smaller size company, say 100 employees or less, obviously the C-suites, or at least maybe the CEO and the CRO, or maybe the whole executive team would get involved in these types of cause marketing types of issues, because it affects the brand in many ways, positive and potentially negative, depending on your audience. But
Right.
for the larger companies, like 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 plus, 100,000 plus, how do you actually navigate that on the marketing team? If your marketing team is hundreds of people, say nothing's being done, do you bring it up to someone? Do you ask someone about it who should potentially be in charge of raising that issue? If you're like a content on the content team or a content leader, or you are the social media person and it doesn't necessarily get brought up because maybe even as a leader of social marketing, you're at a Fortune 20 company and you don't have that kind of access.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what I'd love to see, and the way I'd like to see it run is that marketing puts together the options to your points and kind of understands the market, right? And what's going on, to all the points that we've had on this call today. And secondly, for the first time, the executive team probably is involved at an enterprise sized company in this kind of cause and social marketing discussion, which they typically wouldn't be. Typically the CEO would nod with the CMO and it's like, yeah, great, go do it. Happy Pride, enjoy. So that's a change. I think the company internally has a responsibility to its employees, especially its LGBTQ plus employees, to tell them what the game plan is. What's the game plan? Where do we stand? And if it's different than last year, which it is for many companies this year, you should be transparent to your employees about where you're netting and get their input. At the end of the day, this will have ramifications for companies that people want to work for and the brands that they are. And you mentioned about brands kind of making a statement by doing nothing. And I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people where it matters. It matters to me. And it would be something that I would be looking at. You look at Gen Z, you look at millennials, they tend to be very, very in tune to social cause stuff. And more so maybe than old timers like me at the end of the day. And, it's important to have a really kind of clear communication strategy internally and again, evaluate the market correctly. I think.
Yeah. We hadn't even talked about the hiring implications of our potential fantastically amazing potential future employees not going to consider working for you because maybe you decided to opt out just for whatever reason of doing some kind of public awareness on a certain issue. So that's, another thing to think about. I also think that going along the lines of if you're at any size company and maybe you're in charge of the content and that includes social, or you're just one of the social folks, you could use these moments to gain exposure within the leadership team, bringing it to their attention, saying, hey, here's my thought on this. Here's the different points of view. Here's some pros and cons of some things that we could do and at different levels of scale, and use that to be a more significant voice within the company and the marketing team. I think that I would probably do that if I were at another company, and you leading all sorts of different teams, I assume you would embrace that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I think everything you said, I agree with. And I was just thinking that role, the chief diversity officer, has become such an important role for so many companies because they realize it matters. And that to me just kind of ebbs throughout the culture, right? And kind of what's important and what's not. I do get back to managing a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, especially in the last X number of years, like 10 years. And it's impressive to me how important this stuff is for them. Because when I started working in the early 90s, it was like, I want a great job. I want to make money. I want to get promoted and things like that. And you just weren't as aware as you are today on some of the issues and how you can impact them. So it's all good stuff to me. A much more vibrant, better educated, more productive, more important workforce. So.
Couldn't agree more. Wrapping all of this up, be quick to respond whenever you respond. Give some examples of the benefits of that, because you can insert yourself into the discussion rather than being reactive and playing defense for X amount of time after that. Know your customers, and then have that discussion with leadership, with HR, with your marketing team, and just identify what it is you want to support, openly support, how big of a program should it be, what should you do, and what that looks like, and defining that ahead of time so you can be proactive about it and know what your responses will be if something like pre-triage stuff, I think would be good.
Exactly.
Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, point I made a few times, just really for the US market, take a look at what's gone out politically. I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I'm not taking sides. What I'm saying is be aware of it. You just haven't necessarily had to do that all that much in the last 15 years. Lots of rhetoric, but you didn't have to consider it impacting your marketing plan. It clearly just did for Bud Light. It did. So
awesome.
Cool.
Well, thanks for spending time with us and sharing some insights on this very hot topic right now. And it'll probably only become more important in the future, I see. As always, awesome to spend time with you, Don, and we'll catch you again.
All right. Thanks, Scott. A pleasure.
If you like this episode and you want to hear more episodes of Making Fun of Marketing, go ahead and check out us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or chronologic.com/podcast. And we will catch you next time. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully this was a bright spot in your day. You can go ahead and listen to more episodes at chronologic.com/podcast, and give us a 5-star review and subscribe if you just want to hear more and get it fed to you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.